Alright guys, so here I'm going to show you how to work with influence objects as well as a few other deformers that you can use for your rig. I'm going to keep this brief, but I'm going to also cover all the things that you need to know. So here you see a couple of arms that I got set up. We have one here. Let's go and open up our timeline here. Sorry, a little bit of delay there with the video. Let's open up a range slider. Let's also open up, give it a second. Let me get into our time slider there and have it set to 100. And you'll notice, let me zoom out here, an animation I have set here. This one is using a sculpt deformer. Now I have a sculpt deformer parented to this object, and I just basically animated it. When you use a sculpt deformer, you can actually have it so it influences an object several different ways. You go to your create deformers, you select your vertices that you need, and I'll make this one brief, but I'll be more specific with the others. And you go into Sculpt Deformer and you can choose how you want your geometry to be interpolated. So I can go in here, right click on this guy real quick, go to Vertices, and just grab a group of vertices here. And I can choose whether I want it to stretch, even distribution, a ring type of distribution, flip, or project. Now, when you use stretch, when you hit apply, you'll see that the geometry is going to react to that Sculpt Deformer. So you can actually have it move in here and it'll look, and notice it's not very good. It's very sharp, right? It's relating to the polygons. But you'll see it actually will stretch with our object. We can change that by messing with our drop off and our max displacement. So you can actually change some of that as you go. So that's a quick look at that. There's stretch, there's even, there's projection, and let's see what that looks like. So we'll go in here and grab some more geometry again. We'll go to projection, and we'll go even distribution, and we hit apply. And now you'll see it react a little bit differently. And that's kind of a little bit more of what I have going on here. And you can see, you can even have ripples underneath the skin, but you'll notice it only reacts to that area that I had selected. So that's pretty much how a lot of the deformers work. It's either all or just partial that you can actually choose. You can be selective when your vertices, or you can do the whole object. So you got to be careful when you do the whole object. It's better to be precise and to just isolate the regions that you need. Let me close this out. So another one we can do is called the influence object, and let me show you how this works. Let me grab my IKs. IK handle's a little big here. It's okay. So we're going to move this up, and you'll see the muscle bulge out and increase and decrease in size. And how that works is I have it so it's a set-driven key. So wherever this guy goes, it's going to affect the geometry. It's something you can add after the fact. The only thing you have to think about, though, is exactly where you want it to put it and how you want it to react. So I have a set-driven key so that it flexes when he lifts up and then it shrinks when he goes down. You can actually see it in there. And let me show you how to set that system up. So we'll go over here to this guy. He's all by himself in the world, doesn't have any friends. Let's go and make ourselves a NURBS object. So we'll go into NURBS primitives here. We'll go to a sphere. Let me drag a sphere into the scene. I'm going to scale him up briefly here. And let me rotate him. Probably have discrete rotate on. Nope, not today. That's fine. Let me overall scale him down. Get this scaled down. Let's get it into place. Get my finger on the V key and snap it into place. Hit the F key to zoom in and take a look. Move this over. Do a little rotation to get it into the correct positioning. And I'm going to translate this guy. So again, place it exactly where you want it to be. And when you do get it in the right position, make sure that you hide it. If you're actually, going over the geometry, it's better to keep it in the skin. And again, this is a really old school way to actually simulate a muscle system. I gave you some C muscle plugin that you can grab this week. You can explore more of the documentation with Maya's muscle system. The problem with Maya's muscle system, it is very memory intensive. And if your computer's not strong enough, it can be kind of a waste of time. So something to think about. And I'm not requiring that you do have muscles, but influence objects can be in there. You can double check the checklist. Shoot me an email if you're not sure about what's required for the final. I'll break it down to you even more. Alright, if everything's still not clear, send me another email again. Say, Sean, I need you to clarify. It's okay, that's my job. It is almost 1 in the morning. This is what I do. Alright, so we got this here. We got the muscle placed in the right system. Make sure you just name it. We'll just call this bicep demo. So you got a bicep demo. And the reason why you want to name it too is so that you can find this guy later on. There we go. Sorry, a little bit of delay. Alright, cool. And because we're going to paint with him. You have to paint paint his influence, I mean. You have to paint your influences when you create your influence object. Alright, pretty cool. So we got our little muscle there. So let's go and grab our skin. Double check its placement. Shift select our muscle. And we're going to go to our skin, edit smooth skin, add influence. Now let me point something out. This is in my documentation. My documentation talks about how you can add a bone after the fact. So you can turn off use geometry, and this keeps my previous settings because I was adding a bone on another rig. You can turn off use geometry, but in this case we're going to turn it on. If you have use geometry off, you can have a bone placed into the scene, into an object. But when you do place a bone, if your bone's all by himself, like in previous examples, I used to have a bone out here on the claw, and when it was all by itself, I didn't really have to lock weights because it was a good distance from other bones. But if that new bone is coming into your character, and you don't want it to displace your weights, you can lock the weights within that region. Now just be careful. In previous versions of Maya, when you lock the weights, you could only paint weights to an extent, like it may falter out. In the newest version, that may be a little bit of a problem. I haven't come across it yet, but just let me know, and just be aware of that. So we're going to say use geometry. I'm going to actually keep the drop off at 4 is fine. Polygon smoothness, we're not going to worry about that. The NURBS sample, we can leave at 10 because we're using a NURBS, and it's good to use a NURBS object. The reason why here you want to use a NURBS object, well, other programs won't even take it, and older versions of Maya won't either, and I just keep it with NURBS here because it deforms very organically. As you can actually see, a NURBS object does. And we don't have to worry about silhouette. We want a true silhouette. We don't want a simulated one just by hitting the 3 key. We want the NURBS objects. It's very organic, and it actually acts and reacts like a muscle. Alright, so let's go and hit add. So what happens now, you'll notice we can even grab our muscle and move it around. Look at that. We got a muscle in here. But remember my order of operations. I grab the skin, and I shift select the muscle. Now my muscle in here, or influence object, excuse me, is able to influence my geometry. So what you need to do now is you need to go in here, grab your skin. With your skin selected, you need to go in here and paint some weights. So we can go in here and do some weight painting. Edit smooth skin, paint weights, and you can go here or simply just right click and paint weights tool. And you can see our muscle. Let's go and move down. Bicep demo, there he is. So we can paint weights on him. We can remove it, replace it, or add. But also remember, when you bind skin, make sure you're also in interactive. Now we talked about this. Post, according to Autodesk, they say that Post is able to be more stable, has some good undos, allows you to edit things better. Unfortunately, that is not the case. It says it in the Autodesk video, but it does have a disclaimer buried in the Maya documentation. So just be aware of that, and we talked about that in class. That is a bit inconsistent on that level. So again, we have the bicep. We can erase it. Our weights, or add our weights, and you can see we have it. Actually, by default, it's not too bad. Still needs to have a little bit less back here, and so you can go in there and do some painting if you want to. So it's pretty cool. So we can go in here and just do a value of 0. Just going to remove it. So we just mainly focus on the front of the arm. Let me lower my brush because it's ridiculous. If your brush doesn't show up, what you can do is just double check and make sure, and I make this mistake. It's easy to make this mistake. Make sure your screen projection's off. I said in an earlier video, you could keep that on, but that's just me. I'm mixing up your painting texture. That's when you want to keep screen projector on. So you can turn that off. Alright, so we got this here. I can do a little more cleanup. La la la. Look at that, he's so pretty. Alright, so we got this here. So let's go and do our move tool here. And what you'll do now is do SDK. But the one thing I do want to point out, though, you have this muscle in here. I can move until the cows come home. You're going to see that muscle get left behind. And make sure that muscle's parented to that bone. Whatever influence object you bring in, you have to make sure it's connected to the right bone and will move and articulate the right way. I'm going to hard parent that bad boy. So now he's together, and it shouldn't run into any problems whatsoever because this works pretty much like a charm here. Let's grab it, move it around. There we go. Cool. Look at that. Nice. So now that we have that, you want to do an SDK. So I'll just demonstrate it just to save some time. So the driver is going to be our IK or controller with the IK. And as I move it up, you want this guy to increase in size. Really? That's all it is. It's just logic. Pretty much simple logic for this. And we increase it. And then when you move down, he's going to unflex because you can't be flexed all the time. Alright, so we go in there and we hit this. I crack myself up. That joke is great for bar mitzvahs and weddings. Alright, so we got this all good to go. Understand? Cool! So let me show you another one that we have. Let me go in here and remove that from the system. Control Z. And actually, I'm just going to kill him. Die, vermin. And you'll notice we have a little bit of movement here on this guy. So I'm going to go back a few steps here. Let's go back before we do influence object because I have another deformer on here and I just want to show it to you. Boom, 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 boom. Hopefully it won't run out. Sweet! So we can actually kill him at that point. So you'll see I have an animation in here, but I put a deformer on here. Let's go and zoom in. He's very slight, but I want you to be able to see how this moves. And let's actually make sure we're on real time. This is kind of important. Oh, my bad. I want to go in the animation settings. Next to a little key icon. We don't want to do every frame. We want to do real time. And hit save. There we go. Make sure I don't forget that. So you'll watch. Boom, look at that. We have the jiggle deformer. Pretty cool. So let me show you how to set that up. So we're going to do it this time on this fella. The one that has the influence object. We'll gut him like a fish. So we're just going to grab a little bit of his geometry. You can always turn the bones off to get more of what you need. Or you can use the paint selection tool and just paint. We'll just do that. Pretty nice, huh? Paint selection tool has built-in backface culling, so you don't have to worry about selecting something on the other side. So we got that there. With that selected, we're now going to go to another deformer. This one is one of the cool ones. Used to be some problems back in the day, early versions of Maya, wouldn't exactly play back correctly. And the reason why was, I don't know. We would actually put it on real time. It would still get real janky, but it's actually a lot more solid than it used to be. We can control some of that, though, with the stiffness. We can make the stiffness really light. We're going to keep it at 0.5 for now. It's actually not too bad for what we're doing. And you pretty much have to think about in what context do these things occur. In other words, like, is this a fat? Is it a piece of fat? Is it muscle? Muscle is going to jiggle less, and fat bellies will jiggle more. I know this from experience, watching other people. You thought I was going to say me, huh? Right. I'm not fat. I just have large stomach muscles. All right, so we got this here, and we also want it to jiggle only when the object stops. So we hit create. Get it created there. So we got this good to go. Now watch this. We're going to animate this now. It's going to take what we painted. Not painted, but selected. And I can also show you how to paint stuff. And we're going to animate now. Let me lower my IKs are crazy. Let's go to my animation and let's go to my IK handle size. And lower that. Hello. There we go. Cool. And I didn't bother making a controller. Shame on me. Alright, so we got this here. Let's go to 0. And I'm going to set my first key. There we go. That's the noise it makes when you set keys if you didn't know. And then I'm going to hit S for this guy. And we're going to put it up in the air. Probably a little bit backwards there, but that's okay. Now we hit S. And then we're going to go sudden slam as if he hit somebody. Notice it's already in effect. It's jiggling because we stopped. That's not our true stop, is it? That's not our true destination. We want to go over here and let's do to 90. It's not like a quick stop. Let's do 80. That's a quick stop. We'll lower that and hit S. So let's see how that plays back. Move. Oh, take that. Oh. Pretty cool. Look at that. Pretty nice. So you can actually go in here and mess with the properties. We can click on this guy, scroll down. You can find your jiggle. Now there's a thing called the jiggle catch. A lot of times you can use this if you have a lot of jiggle going on. By default, you really don't need, if it's something simple, you don't need to create a jiggle catch. But the jiggle catch, what it does, it allows you to actually go in here and make Maya catch it so it doesn't slow things down. Make it do through the whole time slider. Now you saw me do the end cloth. The end cloth has an end catch, so the jiggle catch works similar. It stores the information in a separate folder so Maya can reference it, so it doesn't have to recalculate every time. But if we look at this here, we have the jiggle catch here. Let's go up to jiggle. You can get some of your parameters here that we talked about. You can control the stiffness, the dampening, the jiggle weight, basically how much weight that piece of tissue is going to have. And we can leave it on tangent is fine, but you can switch these up. You can turn them on or off. And a motion multiplier if you want to increase your motion or not. Okay, test them out as you go, and if you get something you like, write it down because you will forget. Alright, so that's about it with that one. Also, if you guys have a hard time painting weights, if you're having a hard time, like some area just isn't working, you can do a corrective blend shape. Corrective blend shapes are fine. You're not really cheating. An example that we had was one of my contractors, which I'll show you in class. We had this cowboy we were working on, and we were running into trouble. Now my lead was in charge of the project and was helping out with it, but the star of the show was a rigger named Edward who had done an internship with us, and we were having problems with the deformations, and what he did was create a lattice. He used blend shape deformers to actually correct the issue that would happen. So simply, if I bent this arm, and I'll show you in class, if I bent this arm and it was pinching irregular, I can make a blend shape deformer that fixes that, and I can isolate that region, because you can even paint on those. And you can even paint on your influence objects too. So if we go into one of our influence objects, let's go back a few steps. Or I shouldn't say influence objects. You can paint on your jiggle deformer. Sorry about that. And we can go in here and take a look at him. It's pretty cool. Go to our paint jiggle weights. Look at that. So we can actually make it stronger or lighter. Double click on the tool. And this allows you to switch between what particular deformer you're working with. So we're mainly focusing on a jiggle for now. Even when it comes to your end cloth, you can paint on it too. And we can get into that later on if we have time. Otherwise, we'll keep it pretty simple there. So that's about it with those. And there's also regular ones, or not regular, but the ones mainly used for animation. And in this case, we're going to have to use it, right? Being a rigger, you're going to be using it for animation. But you can also use them for modeling. I know a lot of my modelers use it, like lattice and so forth. And we went over lattice in some of our hard surface classes. But lattice can also be used to correct any kind of stuff going on. And last time we used a lattice, we used it for our rigid bind. It was there to help do our deformation. So let's turn our joints off for a second. So you can grab a lattice. You can grab a set of vertices if you want to. Oops, sorry, I hit paint on accident. Let's go back in here. Vertices. And we'll use the paint selection tool. We can just paint. Oh, looks like Camtasia. This is the same thing you saw before when Camtasia decided to turn off my brush. Thank you, Camtasia. You're amazing. I love you. We'll just go and select it old school. So you can go in here and you can even create a lattice. That was the worst Sean Connery imitation ever, I know. Shut your face. We go to create, and you can create a cage. Let's make that a little simpler. Or even simpler than that. And this works like height, width, and depth. And we went over this before when it came to the other ones, and you can choose. We can be a little picky here. The other rigid bind lattice, so it works the same way. So we can go in here, and you can right-click on these and grab that lattice point, and you can use it to correct anything that might be happening with your rig. And you can even grab this, and check this out. We can do a set-driven key with this. So I can load. It will actually load. That point will load my set-driven key. And when I select it, you can choose the value X, Y, and Z, which is pretty cool. So you can have it as a driven object. You can have your IK drive it, and then these points will be the driven. But one thing I do want to point out when you're using a lattice, and people forget about this, is you have to parent this guy and shift select his base. One is the actual lattice, and the other one is the drop-off control, how the points are being influenced that aren't being selected, like the strength of it. If I click on the base here, you'll see that we have like our base here, and then we have the actual lattice, but you'll see down here we have our divisions of our drop-off control with this too at the same time. And that's here's our initial one. Down here you can see you can turn on the strength of that, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I'll go in here and right-click lattice point, grab lattice, move it around, and watch this. A little drop-off control. If I go higher, you'll see the point shift. See that? So height, width, and depth allows you to control the influence on it. We don't have enough on the depth here. All right. So again, when you are going to parent this to the bone, you have to grab your lattice and your lattice base. Both nodes are working so that you can actually have one for drop-off and one for actual control. And you can see that one is stationary and the other one is for animating. All right, cool. Let me delete that for a second. Okay. All right, so that's the lattice, and that's the influence object, sculpt deformer, and there's a few linear ones that you can use too. And I'll make this super quick. I know, I like talking about this stuff. So I can go on forever. I don't have any friends. I can grab this here, and I go create deformers, non-linear. You can also do a bend deformer if you wanted to, or you can even, let me do Control Z. You can even change that up and say you want to do a squash and stretch. And in this case, might work pretty well. You got to be careful with these because these are a little bit more literal, and they're straightforward. So using the influence object a lot of the times, or a cage such as a lattice, can be ideal, and we do use that a lot whenever we need to. It does sometimes happen, especially with really complicated rigs, which we're working with right now for cinematics, and they really come in handy, even using the corrected blend shape. But you'll see here with the factor here, this allows us to control the squash and stretch. But you'll notice it isn't. It's really strong, right? But you can control a thing called the low bound and the high bound. You can control where it is pushing the deformations. So now when we mess with a factor, just by messing with the low bound and the high bound, you can see a little bit less. Be careful though, you can go too far and invert the whole thing. So these are things that might work good if you want like a little bit of a belly or a more cartoony look for your character. The envelope can turn it on and off, so if you want to connect that through the connection editor, set your key, or even if you're exploring expressions, you can actually make sure that you tag that guy and you turn it on and off. You can have a variable to have it on and off, like a boolean. Alright, so that's about it. And if you have any questions, send me an email, and I'm done, son, or ladies.